For hundreds of years, Western society navigated by a single, unyielding star. The Church provided a shared moral vocabulary, a rigid foundation that offered absolute answers to life's most complex questions. Today, that compass is spinning. The largest religious institutions in the world are tearing themselves apart from the inside. Two distinct camps are driving this division. On one side, traditionalists demand a rigid adherence to the old ways, a foundation built of stone. On the other, progressives argue that as human understanding grows, our morality must actively evolve. When the institution responsible for defining Western ethics for a millennium fractures, it removes the shared moral baseline for the entire society. Unable to agree on a shared truth, the institution is bleeding members. Millions of people, repelled by the endless ideological gridlock, are simply walking away, fueling the rapid rise of the religiously unaffiliated, often called the nones. This exit often leaves deep psychological scars. Movements like the exvangelicals highlight the intense stress, the cognitive dissonance, felt by believers who find themselves trapped between a rigid past and an unrecognizable future. As the legacy structures collapse, they leave behind a massive spiritual vacuum. Millions are left homeless, trying to piece together meaning and community without a centralized guide. The turning point traces back to the 1960s. A decade of mass protest over civil rights and bodily freedom permanently rewrote the moral vocabulary of the West. While headlines focus on specific votes over marriage or gender, these conflicts are symptoms of a structural collapse. The real conflict is about who has the final authority to define truth. For centuries, authority flowed from the top down, via institutional decrees. Today, we practice the you religion. The modern consensus dictates that truth is found internally, validated entirely by your own lived experience. When one group answers to an ancient text and the other answers to internal conviction, they lose the ability to speak to each other. They are fighting over the actual source code of human truth. This split is clearest in how both sides read the same Bible. Traditionalists submit to a literal, inerrant text. Progressives filter those exact same words through a lens of historical context and human error. That same friction drives the debate over marriage and gender. One side anchors itself to divine biological design, while the other elevates fluid identity and human equality. From questions of when life begins in bioethics to whether the Earth is a resource to dominate or an ecosystem to protect, every single debate applies pressure, stretching the institution to the breaking point. These incompatible logic systems are then fed into digital algorithms optimized for outrage. Cancel culture and online purity tests quickly seal both factions into impenetrable echo chambers. We no longer hear the other side's prayers. Meaningful compromise is impossible when two groups are answering to entirely different supreme authorities. We are now entering the post-denominational era. The massive, unified church brands of the 20th century are fading, quickly replaced by isolated, hyper-polarized communities. The middle ground has vanished. On one end, you have a Gen Z tradcath revival, young people seeking the absolute certainty of ancient ritual. On the other, progressive believers are gathering in decentralized house churches with no hierarchy at all. And this split is geographical. While the West continues to lean progressive and secular, the global South is booming, rapidly cementing itself as a massive, powerful stronghold of traditionalism. The dream of a completely unified global faith has collapsed. In its place are heavily entrenched camps, staring each other down across a vast theological divide. At the center of this tension is the paradox of faith itself. For a belief system to survive, it requires both the stability of deep roots and the flexibility to grow. Without the roots of tradition, faith is easily blown away by whatever cultural wind happens to be blowing. But without the progress of growth, tradition hardens into a grave. This leaves the modern believer profoundly isolated. Stripped of a unified institution to guide them, individuals are forced to navigate this incredibly thin tightrope, searching for a middle path entirely on their own. The institutional divide has become personal. Without a centralized guide, the individual now carries the weight of deciding what is sacred, effectively becoming the sole architect of their own moral universe.